Maryland is not what most people think it is. Most Americans picture crab cakes, colonial architecture, and the suburbs of Washington. That picture is incomplete. Beneath one of America's most iconic bodies of water sits a buried asteroid crater the size of a city. And right now, today, that crater is slowly collapsing and pushing ancient saltwater into the wells of millions of people. The land itself is sinking. 500 communities that existed on maps in the 1600s are now open water. An entire town is currently being evacuated as the ground gives way beneath it. The bloodiest single day in American history happened in a cornfield here, and that cornfield still echoes with sounds that have no source. Edgar Allan Poe died in this state wearing a stranger's clothes with 5 days of his life completely unaccounted for. These are not legends. These are documented, verified, and in most cases actively unfolding. This is Maryland. And these are 25 facts about it that most people have never heard. Number 25. Maryland narrows to 1.8 miles wide. At the town of Hancock in western Maryland, the entire state compresses to a strip barely wider than some city blocks. Pennsylvania sits on the northern border, West Virginia on the southern, and you can drive across Maryland's full width in under 2 minutes. This is the result of colonial-era border negotiations, the Mason-Dixon line, and the Potomac River converging in a geographic accident that squeezed the state nearly out of existence at its western end. At its widest point, Maryland stretches over 200 miles. At Hancock, it is thinner than many university campuses. Stand in the right position, and 3 states are within a single mile. Number 24. The first electrical message in human history was sent from Baltimore. On May 24, 1844, Samuel Morse stood in the United States Capitol and transmitted 4 words to the receiving station at Mount Clair Station in Baltimore. "What hath God wrought?" The message traveled 40 miles in a matter of seconds through electrical wire. Before that moment, information moved at the speed of a horse. After it, information moved at the speed of light. Every text message, every email, every instant communication in human history traces conceptually back to that 40-mile exchange and the question Morse chose to ask, as though he already sensed he did not fully understand what he had created. Number 23. Maryland's official state anthem is a call to armed rebellion against the United States, the song Maryland. My Maryland was written in April 1861 by James Ryder Randall, days after pro-Confederate mobs attacked Union troops marching through Baltimore, killing soldiers and civilians in the street. The lyrics call Abraham Lincoln a tyrant and a despot, call Union soldiers Northern scum, and urge Marylanders to take up weapons and join the Confederacy. The song is set to the melody of the German Christmas carol O Tannenbaum. Maryland never actually seceded. Nevertheless, in 1939, the state legislature made this song its official anthem, and it remained official for 82 years, longer than the Confederacy itself existed, and was played at government ceremonies and public events. It was finally repealed in 2021 and was not replaced with anything. Number 22. George Washington surrendered absolute power in an Annapolis state house and changed the course of democratic history. On December 23, 1783, Washington stood before the Continental Congress, then meeting in the Maryland State House in Annapolis, and resigned his commission as commander of the Continental Army. He controlled the only significant military force in the new nation. No legal mechanism existed to stop him from keeping that power. European monarchs, including King George III, fully expected him to declare himself king or dictator. That is what victorious generals did. Washington walked away instead. King George reportedly said that if Washington truly surrendered power voluntarily, he would be the greatest man in the world. The room where it happened still stands in Annapolis. That act established the precedent for civilian control of the military in the United States, and every American institution has depended on it since. Number 21. Frederick Douglass escaped slavery in Baltimore at age 20 and launched one of the most consequential careers in American history. On September 3, 1838, Douglass disguised himself as a free sailor, using borrowed identification papers, and boarded a northbound train. Within 24 hours, he crossed from enslaved to free. One careful inspection of his documents, one wrong look from a conductor, and he would have been seized and likely killed. He made it to New York. Baltimore had illegally allowed him to learn to read. The city's shipyards gave him skilled labor experience. He repaid it by escaping and becoming exactly what the system feared most: a free black man with a documented voice in a national audience. He did not reveal his escape route until after the Civil War, protecting it for anyone who might use the same path. Number 20. Harriet Tubman escaped from Maryland alone in 1849, then returned 13 times. Born enslaved in Dorchester County around 1822, Tubman escaped to Philadelphia on foot, roughly 90 miles, guided by the North Star and strangers willing to hide her. She reached freedom. Then she came back. Over the following decade, she returned to Maryland 13 separate times and guided approximately 70 people north to freedom. She carried a pistol on every trip, and she was clear about its purpose. Anyone who lost their nerve and turned back would endanger everyone, so the choice she offered was freedom or death. She was never caught. She never lost a single person. Maryland tried repeatedly to reclaim her as property, and she kept returning anyway. Number 19. The Snallygaster terrorized Frederick County in 1909 and made national news. German settlers in western Maryland had called the creature Schneller Geist, which means quick spirit, since the 1700s. In 1909, a wave of sightings brought the story to newspapers across the country. The Middletown Valley Register published detailed accounts of tracks, livestock deaths, and mass community sightings. Witness descriptions were so wildly inconsistent, winged, scaled, tentacled, beaked, clawed, that reporters could not agree on what people were seeing. Communities armed themselves. People refused to go outside after dark. President Theodore Roosevelt was reported to have considered postponing his African safari to personally hunt the creature. Whether that specific claim is accurate or newspaper exaggeration, the fact that it was considered plausible tells you how far the story had spread. Number 18. The Goat Man of Prince George's County has been reported for over 70 years and comes with a federal government origin story. Since the 1950s, residents of suburban Maryland have reported encounters with an upright, half-human creature wielding an axe in wooded areas near the Beltway. Most sightings cluster near the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, a United States Department of Agriculture facility, where scientists have conducted animal research since the 1910s. Local tradition holds that the creature resulted from an experiment gone wrong on those grounds. The Goat Man is one of the few American cryptids with a federal agency as its alleged creator. The most famous sighting location is Governor's Bridge Road in Bowie, which locals call Goat Man's Bridge. Teenagers perform a ritual there. They call out to the Goat Man at midnight and wait. The story survives because each new generation keeps testing whether it is real. Number 17. A sea monster was filmed in the Chesapeake Bay in 1982, sent to the Smithsonian Institution for analysis, and was never officially identified. Robert and Karen Frew captured footage near Kent Island of something moving through the water that was estimated between 20 and 40 feet long undulating in a vertical serpentine motion. They were confident enough to submit the footage to the National Museum of Natural History. Dr. George Zug of the Smithsonian analyzed it and concluded the footage showed an animate object. He could not identify it. The Smithsonian has never retracted that finding, never updated it, and never offered an alternative explanation. The Chesapeake Bay is larger than Loch Ness, significantly murkier, far less monitored, and sits above a fractured asteroid crater with underwater structures that have never been fully mapped. Locals call the creature Chessie. Official science has left the case open. Number 16. Beneath a church in Baltimore, there are accidental mummies. Westminster Hall was constructed in 1852 directly over an existing graveyard, built on brick piers above the graves rather than relocating them. The structure created a sealed underground environment, cool, dry, and stable in temperature year-round that no one planned for and no one anticipated. Bodies buried beneath the church with no embalming and no preservation treatment mummified naturally because the building above them accidentally created ideal conditions. Visitors can tour the catacombs beneath Westminster Hall today and view mummified remains through glass panels in their original crypts. Edgar Allan Poe is buried in the churchyard immediately outside the same building, steps away from bodies preserved by architectural coincidence. Number 15. Edgar Allan Poe was found dying in Baltimore in a stranger's clothes, and no one has ever explained what happened. On October 3, 1849, Poe was discovered delirious on a street outside a Baltimore polling place, wearing cheap, ill-fitting clothing that was not his. He had been missing for 5 days with no documented stops, no witnesses, and no paper trail. He was taken to Washington Medical Hospital, where he remained incoherent and never recovered enough to explain what had occurred. He died on October 7th, repeatedly calling out the name Reynolds, a person no one in his life could identify. His medical records were subsequently lost. His original clothing was never recovered. The man who spent his career writing about premature burial, madness, and death died inside a genuine mystery. The 5 missing days remain completely blank 175 years later. Number 14. The Ouija board was invented in Baltimore, and its creator is buried under a tombstone shaped like one. In 1890, Elijah Bond and his partners developed the talking board at a location on North Charles Street. According to the account given at the time, when the group asked the board during a session what it wanted to be called, the planchette spelled out the letters O-U-I-A and indicated it meant good luck. The board named itself. Bond filed the patent in 1891, creating a literal United States government patent for a device claimed to facilitate communication with the dead. He died in 1921 and is buried in Greenmount Cemetery beneath a headstone engraved with the full alphabet, numerals, the words yes and no, and the word goodbye at the bottom. The address where the board was invented is now a 7-Eleven. You can buy a Slurpee at the birthplace of America's most famous tool for contacting the dead. Number 13. The Battle of Antietam on September 17, 1862 produced 23,000 American casualties in 12 consecutive hours. That is 32 men killed, wounded, or missing every single minute for half a day without pause. A sunken farm road called Bloody Lane was filled with bodies stacked so densely that witnesses reported being able to walk across them without touching the ground. More Americans became casualties at Antietam in a single day than during the entire Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and the Mexican-American War combined. It remains the bloodiest single day in American military history. Today, park rangers and visitors regularly report the sound of cannon fire with no identifiable source. the smell of gunpowder in empty fields, and uniformed figures at tree lines that are empty when approached. The National Park Service documents these reports and declines to comment officially. It is a permanent space where something is widely experienced and formally unacknowledged. Number 12. Antietam also changed the entire course of the Civil War. President Abraham Lincoln had already drafted the Emancipation Proclamation by September 1862, but his cabinet had warned him not to release it after a series of Union defeats. Announcing abolition from a position of military weakness would look like desperation, and could potentially draw Britain or France toward recognizing the Confederacy. Lincoln needed a victory first. Antietam was barely won. Lee withdrew, Union forces did not pursue, and casualties were nearly equal, but it was enough. 5 days later, Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, reframing the war as a conflict over slavery and closing off any realistic path toward European intervention on the Confederate side. The 13th Amendment and the end of legal slavery in the United States traced directly back to a cornfield in Sharpsburg, Maryland. Number 11. The rivers of the Chesapeake region are still bending around a crater they cannot see. The James, York, Rappahannock, and Potomac rivers all follow unusual curves that align precisely with the rim of a buried impact structure 35 million years old. The asteroid fractured bedrock in a roughly circular pattern across hundreds of square miles, and water follows zones of weakness in rock. Over tens of millions of years, the rivers carved their channels along those fractures, tracing the outline of an impact that happened before the first grass grew on Earth. The crater is buried under between 1,000 and 1,500 feet of accumulated sediment. The United States Geological Survey seismic imaging confirmed the direct correlation between the river paths and the buried structure. The rivers do not know the crater is there. They follow it anyway. Number 10. The Chesapeake Bay itself exists because of an asteroid and an ice age. 35 million years ago, a rock estimated at 2 to 3 miles wide struck what is now the Virginia-Maryland coast at approximately 100,000 miles per hour, carving a crater 25 miles across and over 1 mile deep. The crater filled with sediment over millions of years, but remained a structural low point in the terrain. The Susquehanna River carved a valley through the area. When the last ice age ended roughly 18,000 years ago and sea levels rose, that valley flooded. The flooded basin became the Chesapeake Bay. The bay's shape, depth, and location, and the entire identity of the state built around it, are products of two catastrophic events, one cosmic and one climatic, neither of which any human being ever witnessed. Number 9. Maryland has been losing its landmass for 4 centuries and has never stopped. Since English colonists first systematically mapped the Chesapeake Bay in the 1600s, over 500 named islands and shoreline communities recorded on those maps have disappeared completely beneath the water. Holland Island had 360 permanent residents, 70 houses, a school, and a post office. By the 1920s, it was fully abandoned. The final standing house collapsed into the bay in 2010, and the collapse was recorded on video. Sharps Island had a functioning hotel. James Island was 1,000 acres of farmland. All of it is now open water. Compare a 17th century navigation chart of the Chesapeake to a modern satellite image. Hundreds of named places simply no longer exist, and the process has never paused. Number 8. The land beneath Maryland is physically sinking, and the rate is accelerating. During the last ice age, sheets more than a mile thick sat atop what is now Canada. Their weight pressed the Earth's crust down and caused the land to the south, including Maryland, to bulge upward. The ice melted. That bulge is now collapsing back at a measured rate of 1 to 2 millimeters per year. Simultaneously, sea levels along the Atlantic coast are rising at 3 to 4 millimeters per year due to ocean expansion. The combined effect gives the Chesapeake region relative sea level rise at nearly double the global average. USGS and NASA have both confirmed these measurements. What other coastal cities are projected to experience in 50 years, Maryland is already experiencing and measuring right now. Number 7. An entire Maryland community is currently being evacuated as the ground gives way beneath it. Crisfield, on Maryland's eastern shore, sits at 2 to 3 feet above sea level and was built partly on compacted oyster shells used as fill throughout the 19th century. Those shells are still compacting. The land is still sinking. Saltwater is destroying roads, sewer systems, and water infrastructure. Chronic flooding has made large sections of the town effectively uninsurable, and residents have been relocating inland for 2 decades in a slow, continuous departure that accelerates with each new storm. The process mirrors what happened to Holland Island exactly. The same forces, the same trajectory, playing out at a larger scale and slower motion. Number 6. The asteroid crater buried beneath the Chesapeake Bay is still active right now. When the impact occurred 35 million years ago, it drove seawater deep underground and sealed it beneath layers of shattered rock. That water, Cretaceous seawater between 100 million and 145 million years old, has been trapped underground ever since. It was never exposed to the atmosphere, and it carries roughly twice the salt concentration of the modern ocean. Right now, as the fractured crater walls slowly compact under the weight of accumulated sediment, that ancient hypersaline water is migrating upward and entering the freshwater aquifers used by millions of people across coastal Maryland and Virginia. USGS studies have directly documented increasing salinity in wells throughout the region and traced it to the crater's geology. There is no mechanism to push the ancient water back down, and there is no way to stop the compaction. The impact from 35 million years ago is still unfolding. Number 5. The buried crater beneath the Chesapeake Bay is the largest confirmed asteroid impact site in the United States and the 6th largest on Earth. The energy released at the moment of impact has been estimated at roughly 100 million megatons of TNT, approximately 2 million times more powerful than the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated. Everything in the immediate strike zone was vaporized instantly. The crater left behind was 25 miles wide and originally over 1 mile deep. For decades, geologists noticed its effects without understanding the cause. Rivers bending in unexplained patterns, sediment layers that made no sense, and groundwater chemistry that defied available models. The crater was not definitively confirmed until the 1990s, when USGS, drilling programs and seismic imaging finally revealed what had been hidden under one of the most historically examined bodies of water in North America. Number 4. Maryland has been losing named, mapped, inhabited communities to the water for 400 consecutive years and has never stopped. The rate has not slowed. In recent decades, it has increased as storm frequency, rising sea levels, and accelerating land subsidence combined to push the pace of disappearance beyond anything recorded in the prior 3 centuries of observation. No technical intervention currently underway operates at a scale that would reverse or meaningfully slow the overall trend. Maryland is losing its physical geography on a continuous basis, has been losing it since the first European cartographers drew it down, and nothing in the present trajectory suggests that process will stop. Number 3. The buried crater is actively contaminating the drinking water supply of millions of people, and there is no available remedy. USGS monitoring has documented a clear and continuing trend. Ancient hypersaline water of Cretaceous origin is moving upward through the fractured geology of the impact zone and reaching the freshwater aquifers that coastal communities depend on. Once an aquifer is reached by high salinity intrusion, it cannot be cleaned. The water cannot be pumped back down. The geological compaction driving the process cannot be interrupted. The impact happened before humans existed. Its consequences are arriving now, being measured now, and the degradation is ongoing. Millions of people in coastal Maryland and Virginia are drawing drinking water from a system being quietly destroyed by an event 35 million years old. Number 2, almost all of it, the bay, the rivers, the sinking land, the disappearing islands, the contaminated wells, the town being abandoned right now, traces back to a single asteroid impact that no living thing on Earth witnessed. The Chesapeake Bay formed from that crater. The rivers follow fractures the impact created. The ancient water contaminating aquifers was sealed underground by that impact. The structural low point that makes the entire region vulnerable to flooding is a product of that impact. Maryland's physical identity, the feature that defines the state's geography, economy, and culture, exists because a rock 2 to 3 miles once arrived from space at 100,000 miles per hour 35 million years ago and remade the terrain. That event is not finished. It is still producing measurable, worsening consequences. The asteroid is still winning. Number 1. Maryland is being consumed by a geological process that began 35 million years ago, and almost no one living in the state is aware of its scale. The land is subsiding at a documented rate. Sea level is rising at nearly double the national average. Ancient seawater is entering aquifers with no remedy available. More than 500 named communities are already gone. A town is actively being evacuated. The rivers curve around a crater they cannot detect. The bay that defines the state exists because of an impact no human ever saw. And woven alongside all of that geology and all of that physics is a death no one explained, an anthem no one read, a sea monster no one identified, mummies no one intended to preserve, and a room in Annapolis where a man with an army chose to walk away and made democracy possible. Maryland is not crab cakes and colonial charm. It is a state built on catastrophe, shaped by deep time, sinking into its own past and still losing ground today. Most people will never know any of this. Now you do. If you want more facts that most people have never heard about, places they think they already understand, subscribe. Leave the strangest fact you know about your own state in the comments, and if you are from Maryland, you already knew something was off. You just did not know how far down it goes.